things off, we are going to look at the latest trends of e-commerce app ecosystem, especially here in Brazil. We are focused on what market is doing in terms of user acquisition, how brands retarget users, and we will talk about evolving media mix. And most importantly, we'll talk about how you, as marketeers and app owners, what you should do and how you can focus on better performance and long-term growth. Now let's take a look at the shopping and food and drink category growth over year. For shopping, it's impressive 12% year-over-year growth. A bit smaller for food and drink. But when we look at the trend, it's clear that the market is growing steadily, with a bit of fluctuations, but still. And one key factor that is driving this growth is cross-border commerce, which is playing a crucial role in shaping this market. Global players are expanding their reach, and Brazilian consumers are becoming more open to international shopping experience. And as I mentioned earlier with the finance category and app market, when we do analysis, we don't just look at the data of the whole category. Our goal is to go deeper. We want to make sure that we consider different subcategories within e-commerce. For this event, we've built our own taxonomy that includes different groups of e-commerce businesses. That also we need to understand that it allows us to spot key differences and analyze strategies differently, depending on the behavior of each segment. We have a couple of major groups, and other would be under one whole group. So let's take a look at the data. When we look at fashion and marketplaces apps in Brazil, one thing that stands out that almost 70% of these apps are owned by international companies. While for the other category, which is having grouping of beauty, pets, drugstore subcategories, this is still very local. 97% of apps are from Brazil. This shows that global cross-border marketplace brands have a strong grip in Brazilian market. For local apps, this means that they need to focus on niche positioning, retargeting users, investing in retention strategies, and use comprehensive strategies to stay competitive. For marketeers, local marketeers, this is a wake-up call for brands. Now, talking about platform share. Brazil, of course, are dominated by Android. And in marketplace category, the situation is the following. Most of the traffic comes from retargeting. And when it comes to iOS, we have a bit bigger share for iOS user acquisition campaigns. Also, additionally, what you don't see on this slide, but I wanted to just emphasize, if we take the marketplaces category and only look at the international ones, they have higher share of user acquisition on iOS, and they have higher share of retargeting on iOS. Overall, Android still performs better, especially in terms of media mix and scale. While Android still leads in overall share in fashion apps, we have much more balanced split. iOS holds significantly higher share of user acquisition and retargeting when we compare to marketplaces. Similar situation that you see here is going to be for the other category. Now let's take a look at the media mix. And I was saying that when I'm showing media mix, this is the time for you to take your phones and maybe make pictures if you want to understand how the benchmark looks like. And I've given already explanation that you have different sources here presented on the media mix site, but By top SANs, we mean self-attributing networks, which is Google, Facebook, Apple search ads. Other integrated partner would be any partner that you work with directly. And it could be, for example, Liftoff. You run campaigns and you integrate MMP directly with them. And agency is somebody that runs campaigns for you with different media networks. You just hire agency instead of doing that in-house. They do that for you. It's also integrated partner with AppsFlyer, but campaigns are run by them with different ad networks. So coming back to media mix insights. On Android, everything mostly comes from top self-attributed networks. And iOS has more diversified approach. And by the way, we are talking here about marketplaces apps, just to make sure that you understand the differences of subcategories. What's interesting here, that on Android, there's a lot of movement towards other channels. For example, we see preloads, which is one of the new channels that becomes more important recently. And we also have a share of advanced SRNs, which is TikTok and Snapchat. And these channels only starting to grow, but it's still important to highlight because we see that trend across different brands. So when it comes to the media mix for the fashion apps, it's more self-attributed networks reliant. iOS in fashion still shows more diversification and media mix sophistication, but with slightly less agency reliance than in marketplaces. Alternative channels remain marginal on Android, so there is no experimentation outside trusted self-attributed networks here. In the remaining e-commerce verticals, we see that Android allocates more than 60% of spend for self-attributed networks. In contrast, iOS displays a diversified media mix where owned media, and by the way, by owned media, we mean CRM campaigns, web-to-app flows, partner links. So owned media with agencies combined on iOS have more than 70% of share of ad spend. This suggests that advertisers on iOS have more experimentation and trying to use alternative buying models. So brands that are looking for a scale might take a look at the playbook on iOS and bring agencies and expertise from them to diversify the channels. And as in previous example, here there is also tiny, but still a share of advanced SRN, so people starting to use it. Now let's take a look at the retargeting. And of course, for e-commerce, retargeting is really important. Primary focus is retargeting, so it's not only about user acquisition, it's about retaining existing users. You want to keep them coming back to your app, and that's how the share looks like. For fashion apps, it's higher than for marketplaces. But then when we're exploring more on the trend of the retargeting, we see how the media mix looks like, and that, for example, on iOS, other integrated partners are growing. While for Android, we do see that clients focusing on self-attributed networks, but still have a high share of other integrated networks. For fashion, the retargeting stays quite similar to user acquisition strategy, unchanged. Self-reported networks remain dominant, and this shown across all quarters. There's not a lot experimentation, slow adoption of diversified media mix. But on Android, however, there is a gradual shift towards advanced SRN. So here in the end, you can see that there is a drop a bit of top self-attributed networks and increase of advanced SRNs, which is, in our case, TikTok and Snapchat for now. Marketplaces show more investment in new user acquisition on iOS. Fashion still stays more reliant on self-attributed networks, which is something that tells us that there is not a lot of experimentation and minimal diversification. other e-commerce apps lead in media mix evolution, showing more experimentation with diversifying their channels for user acquisition. iOS more mature in terms of user acquisition, while Android we see interesting dynamic with testing new channels, such as advanced SRNs and preloads. If you're going to have any questions later on, you can find me. Thank you for your time.